Get started now. So if everyone can take a seat and find a comfortable chair. Right. So on behalf of the Human Relations Commission, the City Council, and City Manager Van Beek, we welcome you to the 2022 Social Justice Awards. For 24 years, the Human Relations Commission has been awarding social justice awards in the categories of community government relations, housing, employment, education, and healthcare. We also, every so often, do a Lifetime Achievement Award. We do these to honor the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We always do it in January, the Wednesday after Martin Luther King Day. We want to honor the work and his life and what the community service, the service that he did for our nation, for many, many communities in our country. So there are many great individuals and organizations in the city of Holland, in Ottawa County in general, as many of you well know. They're committed to serving others. And these individuals that are being recognized today do outstanding work to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We recognize that this is very important in our community. Whether you're a business or government, this work is important. And we recognize that these organizations are working to build a community of belonging where all individuals are able to receive the services and opportunities that they provide. So a trait of many of these being honored today demonstrate that commitment and the life work of Dr. Martin Luther King. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the Human Relations Commission. So their role is to cultivate a place where all residents are honored and empowered to become engaged members of the community, unhindered by bias, misunderstanding, and conflict. In short, a place where all have opportunity and access to government services, moreover, a place where all belong. So I'd like to introduce our first Holland Youth Advisory Council member. He'll be doing the first Social Justice Award for the youth, for a special youth in our community. Abraham Hernandez, are you here?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Abraham Hernandez, and I am the Core Council Vice Chair of the Holland Youth Advisory Council, also known as HYAC. Every year, we have the distinct privilege of selecting a high school student in the area to receive the Social Youth Justice Award, an award that recognizes a teenager's commitment to improving our community and making it a better place to call home. This year's recipient is an advocate for bilingual tutoring and for calling out racism and homophobia. She helped found a bilingual tutoring program to assist students who struggle with the English language at the North Branch of Herrick Library. Being tutored in their native tongue helps ESL students to learn quicker and achieve more. David Bleecourt, counselor at Holland Christian, described in his nomination that she also stood up at a fellow boat racing competitors in addressing their racism and homophobic comments to the other teams during a sporting event. An investigation ensued, and her actions led to a new policy to further prevent that. Her dedication to the social justice and equal opportunity and access for all citizens makes her the perfect recipient for this award. Her acts of courage inspired Core Council to name Greta Trevor the Social Youth Justice Award winner for 2022.
Oh,
Can you take a picture?
okay. Thank you. I really appreciate this.
I would like to now introduce Rebecca Skippers.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Skipper, and I am a member of the Human Relations Commission. And as many of you know, one of the primary parts of our commission is to look at the issues of housing. And we know that housing is a large issue across our country, but in the city of Holland, we know that affordable housing is primarily a concern. And so today, we are really excited to present the Social Justice Award for Housing to Heights of Hope. Heights of Hope is a community development organization that focuses on the Holland Heights neighborhood of Holland, specifically the Stratford Way and Abbey Court neighborhoods. These neighborhoods are home to an extremely diverse population with a variety of talents, strengths, challenges, and needs. Heights of Hope is dedicated to the mission of affordable housing, recognizing that rent increases have a dramatic impact on nearly every aspect of a resident's life, including food security. With this mission in mind, Heights of Hope recently bought a 6-plex apartment building on Abbey Court, providing 6 safe and affordable living units that are not at risk for the rent fluctuations that can put renters at risk of affordability. Heights of Hope believes strongly in creating community amongst all neighbors, no matter age, race, gender, ethnicity, or income. And we are thankful for their partnership in making the City of Holland a great place for all to live. I would like to invite Pam King, their director, forward to accept this award on behalf of the Human Relations Commission. So we would like to present the Social Justice Award for Housing to Heights of Hope.
Today, want to thank you for this, and also to acknowledge that our goal is asset-based community development, and when we think about the assets of individuals, I could go on all day about the awesome people who live in our neighborhood, but also the asset used to be that it was an affordable place to live, and as we've seen that skyrocket, our initial mission wasn't to become landlords and to do this, but seeing that need, and we thought, is this what we're supposed to do? And when we crunched the numbers this spring as places were being listed for sale, the numbers didn't work. But then we realized the assets all around in our community, and so many people came together, whether it was individuals and corporations and institutions and churches and the Holland Zealand Community Foundation, all coming together to help us make this a reality. And so while I say thank you, we didn't really do much except get to embrace the wonderful people in our neighborhood and to see the ways that the community can come together. And we also think this is a huge problem. And when they said that we won this, I'm like, it is a 6-plex. Like that's all we did. And felt kind of funny and weird about this. And yet I also am like, but you know what? This was the thing that we could do. And we stepped into it, and if this can inspire all of us to do that thing, and whether it's you alone or whether it's to get together with other people and the power that can happen when you collaborate, then with that in mind, we say thank you.
And now we can see why, we're just so thankful for the work that they're doing and also the amazing leadership that has been shown by all of you. And words for us to live by, right? Just take the next right step forward in doing what we can do. I'd like to invite now Tori Farian forward to present the next award.
So I just first want to apologize to everyone present, especially Henry and Lindsay, because I am an absolutely horrible public speaker. That being said, I was beyond excited when Esther said I got to present this one. So I wrote my speech, typed it even, and I sincerely hope I'm able to convey because I am beyond nervous. Okay. So, for those unfamiliar with the IM Academy, their official description is an organization aimed to help dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline systems within educational institutions through mentorships with students and community partnerships. By partnering with area schools, IM Academy empowers African American adolescents and young adults to achieve their full potential by centering their identity, cultivating relationships, supporting educational success, providing college experiences, and facilitating job readiness, ultimately changing the narrative and trajectory of their community. But this is literally just the tip of the iceberg, and it's ever expanding for them. As one that grew up in the Holland area, as a product of Holland Public Schools, and as a child living in poverty, I can sadly say I never felt like I belonged here. I left at 18 as fast as my little Geo Metro could carry me, thankful that I found a way out. I stayed away for 25 years, and although it was my husband's choice we moved back, he wasn't from here and didn't understand why I didn't want to come back. I am here to tell you that I see a much different Holland than the one I left. This Holland, I'm so proud to be a resident of, and I am beyond thankful to people like Henry and Lindsay for seeing the need in this city and doing all that they have done to be the change that they saw was needed. The community of Holland has changed immensely since Henry and I walked the halls of Holland High School. Not only were there hardly any African American students among our population, but sadly there was also incredibly little support for these students, and they're the ones that needed it the most. Through my own work in Holland High School, I've personally been able to see the impact that IM Academy continues to make. I now see an incredibly diverse student body and the very necessary support for these students. And that has allowed them to make successful changes every day. The best part of these changes is that it's only the beginning for them and for the IM Academy. IM continues to set their sights higher and even further out. They aim to make meaningful and lasting impacts in every single student, from elementary to high school on up. They reach the students that need it most in almost every facet of their educational journey. Just some of what they offer: dedicated life coaches and mentors, weekly and or monthly check-ins, meetings for all students, college visits, visits to local businesses, book studies, STEM activities, reading partnerships, and in addition, IM Academy is incredibly active in our community. This gives students the opportunity to see their community come out and support them. This past year, IM Academy held a Juneteenth celebration, and this initiative allowed Holland to show our students how much support is available to them through collaborations of organizations and a large number of community businesses. IM also let the students themselves share this recognition. They got to dance, they got to be recognized for graduation, they got to participate in a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, as well as all of the fun that the Juneteenth celebration brought to them. This past Monday, IM Academy held the Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration at the Civic Center. This allowed students the ability not only to celebrate someone who ultimately gave his life for Black Americans to have a better future, it gave the students themselves a spotlight, allowing them to further their cause in their own personal development. They shared essays, artwork, interviewed a panel of African American professionals, and shared their own spoken word. The most amazing part of IM Academy is how much it's done in such a short amount of time. Henry and Lindsay started IM Academy in 2020. They've already become the go-to for students and faculty alike. And they have been able to find a positive way for our students. The best part of giving them this award is the fact that I know they're going to use it as a springboard to do even more. They're always striving to find new and impactful ways to give more depth to our children, and I couldn't be more proud as a community member, as a school employee, and as a lover of the students that this community has among them. So this is for IM Academy. Henry and Lindsay, come on up. Thank you. And thank you both for all of your work. So,
That was quick. Well, first off, thank you for the award. Thank you for the nominee, Mr. Hamilton. He's actually come out and been a part of some of the work. So if you want to find out other ways to be involved, you can come out there. As a Holland kid, you know, I grew up here. I graduated here in '96. And like Tori shared with you, there was a lack of resources. We had one person that we could point to. That was Eric Gray. Outside of that, we had no options, no one else that looked like us coming into those spaces. So for me, it was my duty to be able to bring this back to Holland, to be able to give it back to our kids, so that same experience wouldn't be had by them. So they would have different options. They would be able to see themselves outside of what they see on TV. They would see it live and in color. So we thank you for the opportunity to be here and continue to find other partnerships and continue the work. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce Catherine Ristola-Bass for our next award.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Ristola-Bass. I'm on the Human Relations Commission, and I'm privileged tonight to give this award in healthcare to the Miles of Smiles bus of the Ottawa County Public Health Department's Oral Health Promotion Program. Well, I saw the Miles of Smiles bus regularly at my kids at Holland Public Schools when they were younger, intermittently. I didn't really fully grasp what it is. I became fully aware of the program in the last few years as I've worked with refugee families, that these children never had access to dental care ever before in their lives until they got to the Miles of Smiles bus. The team took excellent care of my kids, right? And they also care for many others in our county that need dental work, because some of these families don't have the resources, financial, time, or transportation to get regular dental care for their kids. It's great that all of our kids can get quality care right at school so that they don't miss a school day and that their families can depend on good and safe care without having to leave from work that day. Dental services for children are made possible by a volunteer network of more than 100 dentists, hygienists, and Grand Rapids Community College dental hygiene students. Miles of Smiles has received several commendations for its innovative approach to address major health problems and increase access to direct patient care for qualifying Ottawa County children. The mobile unit provides on-site preventive and restorative dental services for financially qualified uninsured and Medicaid-insured Ottawa County residents. Services are provided at schools, at Head Start centers, at Ottawa County Department of Public Health clinics, migrant camps, and sites for dentally underserved children and adults. The 40-foot mobile unit, big, beautiful bus, is equipped with a waiting area, a lab, 2 operatories, a digital x-ray, and a wheelchair lift, because they really believe in access for all, right? Funding for the program is provided by state grants and foundations, local foundations, donations, and county support. The oral health programs and the Oral Health Promotion Program's legislative involvement has assisted in securing continued funding for Ottawa County dental programs. Statewide involvement in legislative efforts has successfully impacted legislation, resulting in an expansion of dental services to at-risk, underserved populations. The Oral Health Program also assists in the creation of the Michigan Oral Health Coalition and participated in the development of the Strategic Plan for Oral Health in Michigan. The Oral Health Promotion Program staff also holds leadership positions within the Michigan Public Health Association. I nominated the public health professionals that manage this program and all of those that volunteer their many hours, their valuable time and skills to care for the least fortunate in our community of Holland, because they are deserving of this award as a reminder of our gratitude and praise for their good and important work. So I welcome Andrea Whitaker from Ottawa County Public Health and her team, and we're just so grateful they're there.
Thank you so much. I am honored to accept this prestigious award for the Ottawa County Department of Public Health Miles of Smiles program. As it was mentioned, Miles of Smiles treats and prevents dental decay, which continues to be the most common chronic childhood disease. In its 27 years of service, Miles of Smiles has had over 37,000 patient encounters, provided 22,000 fillings, 21,000 sealants, and has had an average reduction in dental disease of 37%. This program would not be possible without the Miles of Smiles team, past and present, our dedicated volunteers of dentists, hygienists, Grand Rapids Community College students. It would also not be possible with the support of the schools, our county administration, and our partnerships within the community. We are thrilled to have this award and look forward to many more years of service.
I now invite Robert Hamilton up for the next award.
Before I get started with my award, I would like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and council members for continuing in these times to support the Social Justice Awards for the City of Holland and for allowing me to sit on the Human Relations Commission and appear before you today to present one of those awards. Thank you very much. Public defenders are on the forefront of our criminal justice system. Arguably, they are the first original champions of social justice, serving indigent defendants and people of color, all of whom are disproportionately represented in our criminal justice system. Although the right to counsel is enshrined in the United States Constitution, public defenders are generally underappreciated, misunderstood, and often maligned. In 1963, in a United States Supreme Court case, Gideon v. Wainwright, the U.S. Supreme Court held that all states must provide competent and qualified public defenders for all indigent adults charged with crimes. At that time, Ottawa County created a system of public defenders that provided defendants with excellent public representation, importantly by fairly compensating the public defenders who were providing those services. Don Hann, David Canal, Joe Leggett, Jim Piper, my friends, my mentors were the first public defenders in Ottawa County, who set the standard for public defenders, standard of excellence. In October of 2018, Ottawa County established the Office of the Public Defender. The establishment of this office within county government allowed defense services in this county and in this city to elevate from excellent to exceptional, and enabled the office to provide services that were not previously available to the community we served. Appropriate for this week, establishment of this office by Ottawa County allowed the hiring of the first 2 Black attorneys to practice law in Ottawa County full-time. Their names are Brandon Bartholomew and Mercedes Watts. Additionally, in 2022, for the first time in Ottawa County history, the Office of the Public Defender hosted 2 free expungement clinics and assisted more than 160 individuals to expunge their criminal records and to have their convictions set aside. These convictions, for those of you who are aware, and especially for those of you who are not aware, are huge barriers to employment, huge barriers to licensing, to the people who perhaps need those jobs and those licenses the most. I recall one young woman, young by my standards anyways, who with teary eyes expressed her gratitude of what an expungement of a 10-year-old drunk driving conviction would do for her. It would allow her to achieve a license from the state of Michigan that would allow her to pursue a career in cosmetology. It would allow her to achieve her full potential. And perhaps more importantly to all of us, it would allow her to become a productive member of our community. I get a little emotional because I was a public defender for many years, so this is sweet to me. So tonight, it's my honor and privilege to present the 2022 City of Holland Social Justice Award in the field of government community relations to the Ottawa County Office of the Public Defender for providing exceptional legal services to the individuals and communities they are serving, and an office that tries to reflect back to our communities of color a system that represents them. I would ask Nicole Dirks. Nicole is the Ottawa County Public Defender. And Nicole, am so touched, proud, privileged, honored to present to you the award for the Social Justice Award in the field of government and community relations. And then I'm going to go cry.
Well, I'm going to stay here and cry while Bob steps away to cry. I would love to thank all of our criminal justice partners that we get to work with every day. These expungement clinics especially took a lot of partnership with our teammates, many volunteers, with our courts, our wonderful county administration, and all of that support that we have for our office is greatly appreciated. But who I'd like to thank most is our clients. It is our privilege and honor to serve them each day. We are given so much by them. They overcome so many challenges and teach us so much about how to live our lives better, and it truly is a privilege to do this work each day. I am sorry, I'm so emotional about it. I'm so grateful for Bob and his support. Bob was our first public defender, and upon his retirement, I was promoted to public defender, and it truly is just a privilege to accept this on behalf of our department. I have many wonderful colleagues who are here today, and I love them enough not to make them come up here. But thank you on all of the Office of the Public Defender's behalf. Thank you.
Sorry, I got a little choked up there. I would now like to turn the floor over to Michelle Slicker to present the Lifetime Achievement Award.
I don't know quite how to follow that up, but I really appreciate the people that I work with. You can tell that we are passionate about what we believe and what we do, and I think that clearly comes through this evening. I would like to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to Ann Weller. Would you mind joining me? stand right up here beside me. There you go. Anne graduated. Come right up here. Don't be shy. Anne graduated from Michigan State University with a BA in journalism and has been utilizing her skills in education ever since. In fact, just today, I called Anne and I said, I need some help. I needed to clarify some things, and she said, why don't you send me over your speech and I'll give it a quick look. So she was able to do that for me, and thank you.
And it was great to start with.
In 1992, after leaving her work with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority as a communications director, Anne established and still operates her own freelance business of editing and proofreading. Moving to Holland in 1996, she met people through the local Baha'i group who valued diversity and inclusion. In 1999, with several of these like-minded people, she helped found what became the Alliance for Cultural and Ethnic Harmony, or ACEH. As a volunteer, she currently writes a weekly email showcasing area diversity and multicultural events, community opportunities, anti-racism resources, and job openings that is circulated to some 1,400 email addresses. And I would encourage all of you, if you don't currently subscribe, to go to the website and subscribe to that newsletter. It's full of great information. A little background about the Alliance for Cultural and Ethnic Harmony helps give context about the talented individual who is Anne Weller. The ACEH was founded to work for justice, equal opportunity, appreciation for diversity, and cross-cultural understanding. It is a grassroots, volunteer organization open to anyone who wishes to create a community where everyone is welcomed and respected. At First United Methodist Church, she is a member of the Peace with Justice group and the anti-racism team, and she's a strong supporter of other justice organizations here in Holland. Anne's work in the community aligns perfectly with the purpose of the City of Holland's Human Relations Commission, as she promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion in an active collaboration with others, creating a community where we all belong. Her commitment to equity, peace, and justice has helped protect those in historically marginalized communities, and we are so very grateful for her work and dedication. Congratulations, Anne.
Thank you. Now I gotta cry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and especially on behalf of the Alliance for Cultural and Ethnic Harmony and also the people from First United Methodist Church. There are some people here who are also founders of the Alliance, Ben Lim, Herb Weller, and there are many people in here who are part of the Alliance. So if you would just raise your hand, if you've been a member or an officer, that would, yeah, great, thank you. I grew up in the South when everything was segregated, legally, in practice, everything, every single thing. And even as a kid, I knew this is not the way to live. This is not good. And so, through my life, before I moved here and since I moved here, if there are issues of peace and justice, if there are issues of gender equality, if there are issues of who can belong and who can't belong, I will never be a bystander. Thank you.
So that is the last of the Social Justice Awards. I would like to invite you for a small reception here in the atrium outside. Our city council meeting will begin, so I would ask for everyone who's not here for the city council meeting and wants to participate in the reception, please go out as soon as possible so our city council can do their business.
And congratulations to all of the award winners, and you're all invited to stay for the council meeting. But I don't think we can compete with a reception, so. Good evening, and again, a congratulations to all of the Social Justice Award winners this evening. And it is January 18th. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Holland City Council. Call this meeting to order. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Present.
Freeman.
Present.
Peters.
Here.
Corbin.
Here.
Coronado. Here. Arnshorst. Here. Hoekstra.
Here.
Raymond. Here. Mayor Box.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. We're going to begin this evening, as we have for many years, first with an opening prayer, this evening by Councilmember Hoekstra, followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we would invite you to join us if you are so inclined.
Let's pray. Grant us, Lord God, a vision of your world as your love would have it, a world where the weak are protected and none go hungry or poor, a world where the riches of creation are shared and everyone can enjoy them, a world where different races and cultures live in harmony and mutual respect, a world where peace is built with justice and justice is guided by love. Give us the inspiration and courage to build it. Lord, let it be so. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dave. Next item on our agenda are our consent agenda items. These are items that are considered to be fairly routine, and they've been reviewed by council as part of our packet. They will be all enacted in one motion unless a member of the public or a member of city council asks for an item to be removed from the consent agenda and placed in its regular order on the regular agenda. But before I ask that, Kathy, would you please review the consent agenda for us?
4B, approval of minutes, January 4th, 2023 regular meeting, and January 11th, 2023 study session. 4C, oaths of office. 4D, written petitions and communications, tax abatement PA 198, MG 88 Holland Cold Storage LLC. 4E, Hart Solar amended and restated letter of authorization. 4F, Second Amendment and restated System Interconnect Facilities Agreement with METC. 4G, approved proposal for consulting engineer services. 4H, award bid, analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. 4I, award bid, printing services. 4J, award bid, fence. 4K, September financial reports. 4L, quarterly investment report. 4M, approved commercial credit card resolution. 4N, award fuel delivery services bid. 4O, fire division purchase of automated chest compression devices. 4P, approved purchase of 2 pickup trucks and 1 vehicle. 4Q, principal shopping district board appointment. 4R, first floor remodeling project furniture.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there any member of the public that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed in its regular order on the regular agenda? Seeing none. Is there any member of council that would like to have an item removed from consent and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none there either. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the consent agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support? Support. Support by Byrd. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd?
Yes.
Vreeman?
Yes.
Peters?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Coronado?
Yes.
Aaronshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful, thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Under the Open Meetings Act of the State of Michigan, we provide the opportunity for the community to communicate with council during all of our meetings of both council and our boards, committees, and commissions. This is an opportunity for you to tell us what you think is important, what concerns you. It is, however, one-way communication. It's an opportunity for you to speak to us. We don't answer questions during this time or engage in debate, but it does give you the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes. There are 3 lights on the dais in front of me, a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. The green light means that you're doing well on time. The yellow light means that you have 1 minute left. And the red light means that your time has expired. And we are strict about that, so we ask that you adhere to that. When you approach the microphone, please state your name and the municipality in which you live. Having said that, is there anyone here who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, after a long speech, I will close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda, written petitions and communications. In addition to providing the opportunity for the public to speak to us directly at council meetings in person, we do also have the ability for you to send us an email, and those emails will then go directly to council. We review those as part of our meeting packet, and then we accept them into the record when we receive them. We don't read them out loud at our meetings, but we do accept them into the record so that the public can see all of them. It's my understanding that we have a couple of them this evening, and so what is the pleasure of council in regard to the written petitions and communications?
Move that we accept these and into the record.
Great.
for it.
Moved by Aaronsource. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Coronado. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item 12B1, text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, This is the 7th round, set for final adoption on February 1, 2023. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. And Steve Peterson, why don't you head on up? And we have a new word for this too. I think it was at the videos last week. If Mark said it in the video, Steve probably said, hey, let's come up with a new word. It's recalibration, I think was the word that we came up with, right? So, Steve, why don't you talk about how we're appropriately recalibrating our Udo?
All right, thank you. Yeah, that sounds like a Mark. Word. Yeah, Markism. So yes, we do. We have Udo round 7 here. So like we have had maybe the last couple rounds, kind of a mix between sort of some corrections and recalibration and maybe some more substantial changes. These first couple in your packet are probably the more substantial changes that we've got for you tonight. So the first one that you've got is for, this is in the PUD section. So you can see here we're really striking out that paragraph F and just replacing it with a much longer paragraph F. So the idea here is, like you have in other parts of the document where we allow for some waivers, some discretionary things for, maybe the Planning Commission to allow for some exceptions or waivers, we call them. The idea in the PUD section, rather than list a whole bunch of sections that could have waivers to them, we wanted to build something that would really allow the Planning Commission to really alter anything in Udo for the project, which is really the concept for a planned unit development type project, that you could look at something and waive anything in our ordinance. So in order to do that, what we've developed is what you see under paragraph 1 there, under letter 1 is A through F. Those are the criteria that the Planning Commission would use to consider such a waiver to anything. If some of that language looks familiar, it's because that's really pulled right from the last few planned unit development agreements that you've done, where we have that little determination paragraph where we talk about how we think the PUD fits in with what the city's trying to do. That language is really pulled right from there. So that A through F would be the criteria that we will use, and that's the criteria really that you've been using already. And then that second paragraph, that number 2, is really just to tell the applicants that you're going to do that based on the materials that you submit, reports, drawings, et cetera. And so that would allow the Planning Commission to come up with a plan unit development and could waive anything. Does that make sense? The second one here that's kind of in the more substantial category is the accessory dwelling units. So this really came from a couple of recommendations that came from the Neighborhood Improvement Committee that they wanted the Planning Commission to take a look at. And after getting their recommendation and the Planning Commission kicking around, this is really the result of that. So I wouldn't describe the changes as wholesale changes to it, but I think just given kind of the history of the accessory dwelling unit through the Udo process, we put this one in that a little bit more substantial changes. So let me just describe kind of what you're looking at here. This table, the table itself is new. The tier 1 is essentially where we're at right now, with a couple changes that we tried to highlight in the yellow there. So the tier 1, what it's telling you is changing the minimum size from 300 to 200 for an accessory dwelling unit, allowing for 3 people. That's up from 2 to 3. The idea was there's maybe a couple, have a child or something, so the ability to do that. And then that third change you see there in tier 1 is the accessory dwelling unit not to exceed 35% gross floor area of the principal dwelling unit. So we're certainly highlighting that as a change, although that's really just more of trying to make that a little bit more user-friendly. Currently, the standard is 1/3, so we just went from the fraction to the percentage and then just kind of rounded up from 33 to 35. So it is a change, but the idea was really kind of keeping it the same. Tier 2 is really the new item from the Neighborhood Improvement Committee recommendation to allow for up to 4 people, and to allow for the accessory dwelling unit to increase from 720 square foot maximum to 800 square foot maximum. So an 80 square foot maximum increase. And then to allow for up to 50% maximum size compared with the principal dwelling unit. And that is only eligible for the people that would have a minimum of 9,600 square foot lot with a 60-foot width lot. Those numbers are I guess what I call the duplex allowance in the TNR zoning district. So that's where those numbers come from. So they're not completely randomly picked out, but that's where we allow for the 2 family units in the TNR. So that's where those numbers come from. The rest of those changes that you kind of see highlighted in red are really maybe just more reorganizing some of the current requirements. We do have the note underneath that table that indicates that they're still going to have to comply with the city code of ordinances for the space requirements. And then you see on that right-hand side of the screen, the ADU can't be sold separately, and that there's some minimum parking requirements. Both of those are really in the ordinance and in the requirements already. Again, just sort of reorganized to hopefully make it a little bit easier to follow. So this is the GMU zoning district. So what we're talking about here is maximum building height. So what I tried to highlight for you, this is a copy of the zoning map. And what I'm trying to highlight in that sort of northeast corner of the city is where we have the GMU zoning district, Greenfield Mixed Use Zoning District. It's only in that area, kind of between 16th and just a little bit south of 24th, east of Waverly, and then west of the park. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see all of our different zoning districts with the height allowances for each of those, the maximum height in each of those zoning districts. And so what you see is the GMU district is 35 feet. And kind of just taking a little tour around that district, to the north in that orange is the HDR zoning district. They have a 45-foot height limit. To the west in the red is the CMU zoning district. They allow for 50 feet. To the south in the gray is the industrial. In the industrial, we allow for 60 feet by right with the ability to go to 100 with the special land use. And then a couple of those items that I want to point out are what kind of looks like where the GMU district has been carved out with that purple zoning district. That's a PUD. Those are 2 different planned unit developments. The one on the left-hand side, kind of fronting Waverly, that's the Home Flats project that's been approved. And then the one on the right-hand side, fronting 24th Street and really the park, is the Rest Haven planned unit development. So with all that info, what the recommendation is to change the height limit to 45 feet with the ability to go to 60 feet with the special use permit. So really kind of grabbing that industrial zoning in terms of how we do height and using that same concept with this one. One of the rationales for this as we look at that property, and again, just remembering that the GMU district is really just in that small area of the city. There's a lot of challenges with those properties. We're finding that there's a lot of wetlands with those. And in order to get any kind of development, we think that people are going to have to go up rather than out. And again, knowing what some of those other height limits are around there, seemed that it would be reasonable to increase that to the 45 feet with the ability to go to 60 feet. And I'll kind of use a couple of these, those PUDs that I mentioned. This is the couple buildings that we approved at Rest Haven. A couple of the larger buildings at Rest Haven were permitted at just over 57 feet. That's a 3-story building. You can see there's kind of a large peak roof. I know it's hard to see or read, but on that right-hand side, that building is almost 70 feet tall to the peak. We measure to the midpoint of the roof line, so that's where that 58 feet comes from. So again, the idea here is 3-story building with a large peak roof. You know, you do need some height allowance in order to be able to do that. This is the Home Flats project, that other PUD, that's the one that's at Waverly and 24th. It's a 4-story, obviously flat roof, just over 52 feet tall. Obviously, if we had this kind of, the kind of zoning that we were talking about for the GMU district, both of these would be, at least in terms of the height, would be permitted in that GMU district. Moving on to the airport. So when we took in those couple properties through that annexation process on that west end of the runway, you can kind of see I tried to highlight that, circled those properties on the west end of the airport. They came into the city. Our ordinance does a really good job of telling us what the zoning will be when properties come into the city, and because they were in an agricultural zoning district in the township, they come in as an LDR zoned piece of property. But one of the things that we need to make sure we do is we need to extend those overlay, the airport overlay lines. So those are the heavy dark lines that you see kind of running all over the area. We've talked about those for some other projects, but as you can see, these properties that we took in are quite encumbered by those airport overlay lines. So we need to make sure that our maps are updated so that those overlays are also included on those properties that we took in. This is in the form-based district. This is just the use of the table that we have for the uses that are permitted. And as you can see, there was simply some omissions of the reference to section 4.03 for all of those special uses that are in that table. So simply want to add that back into the document. Staying in the form-based district, we have in several areas we use vehicle doors. And we think it might be a little bit more clear to use garage door. So simply wanting to change that from vehicle door to garage door, so we're not confusing that with a car door. I think we all would understand in the context, but we just thought this would be I don't know if that's a recalibration or a correction, but a little change to update. I think it is on 4 different pages in the form-based district, so updating all of that. Staying in the form-based district, we have the 1-story building height, so we require that minimum of 16 feet for the 1-stories. Wanting to make sure it's clear here that that requirement would be for new buildings. We do provide a little bit different language in terms of how to measure. That language is really just being modified from what's in there right now. And that if you aren't 16 feet tall on that for a 1-story building, we're simply kicking you to the non-conforming section of our ordinance, which is the next. The mayor's going to keep me honest on this one because I absolutely murdered this at the Planning Commission, so let me try my best.
It's just that I'm not as bright as you are, and I couldn't follow you through the whole thing.
I don't think so. So expansions of non-conforming structures. So we do allow for non-conforming structures to expand, and so we're just simply modifying this language. The modification to the structure cannot create a greater nonconformity with respect to maximum setback and minimum height requirements. That language is important in there because we're talking about the scenarios which would admittedly probably be a little infrequent, where in areas where we have maximum setbacks and where somebody isn't meeting that, you would be allowed to continue. You would be able to put an addition on that and continue that same setback without having to go to Board of Appeals or without having to go to do a waiver. So you'd be able to maintain that same line. So I think maybe where the conversation was at the Planning Commission was, so then you do have you do have the reverse of that. Well, what about if you're violating the minimum setback, which is maybe the more traditional kind of idea when you're talking about setbacks. We have in our ordinance already in that along and within, and Nikki's probably familiar with that at the Board of Appeals, we have that along and within that would allow you to maintain that same setback too. You just have to go to the Board of Appeals in order to continue to do that. And the reason why we're kind of drawing the distinction between those two, if you weren't meeting that minimum setback, you're closer to the road than what you should be. That's probably a little bit more sensitive to neighbors than if it was the maximum setback, or if you're too far back. So all that being said, this is the language that the Planning Commission considered, with the exception of that, hopefully you can kind of pick it out, but that last portion of number 1, for other nonconforming setbacks, see section 1212D3. That's the section that we added at the Planning Commission to help clarify that, that you go to that along and within section. Is that all right?
Can you give them an example of what we're talking about? I think that may be helpful.
For the
modification of the structure that won't on the maximum setback. So building they might be familiar with that is farther back than it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think the example we talked about at the Planning Commission was the recent project with the Dollar General, the old Family Video. That building is much further back than the maximum setback that the maximum setback allows. So this would allow them to do that addition without having to seek the waiver to keep that same, I think they're 150 feet back rather than the 55-foot maximum setback. So they'd be able to keep that same setback without having to get a waiver.
Yeah. So in that instance, they sit way farther back from the road than they're supposed to. In that instance, that particular instance, they were looking at expanding to the side. And because they were a non-conforming use, if we didn't have this provision in there, the rules essentially would say, well, no, you can't continue that same front of the building. You'd have to build actually way far in front of where your building exists right now. And what this is saying is let them continue to build side to side along that same frontage, even though they're already too far back. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they also
Maybe
had
I'm probably the only one who didn't get it, so it's.
they also had a height requirement with
Right.
the addition.
Right.
We went with the old height requirement.
Right, and so again, this change would have allowed them to do that without having to go to the Board of Appeals, because they would be just maintaining it even though it was, I can't remember, 14 and a half feet rather than the 16-foot first story. So allowing them to keep those same nonconformities.
So saying that, if they were to build in front, move forward, what's that look like?
So in the example, for instance, with Family Video, if they didn't do their addition going all the way up to the 55-foot setback line, yeah, they would have needed some sort of exception or waiver. So
anything moving forward that does not meet,
right,
you'll have to get a waiver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this section is essentially saying they can get that waiver from staff. They don't have to come to Planning Commission in order to get that waiver.
And without getting into the weeds too far, the Family Video one, might not be a great example because there was such a distance between what the 55 and where they're actually at. But there could be a scenario where somebody would say, well, shoot, rather than trying to go through that extra process, I'll just do the bump out, and then we end up with some kind of weird configured because they just figured, well, that's easier. Well, I think now by making it just as easy, if not easier, to just maintain your same line, that would probably be much more likely. Yeah. So, again, kind of in the correction phase, RMU district being added to the self-storage facilities, the zone districts where it's permitted. It's already permitted in the RMU. It was just simply left off this permitted use table. Building clear vision corners. So section 901 is where we introduce this topic of clear vision corner. Section 901 is kind of our catch-all for a lot of things. If you remember, we just recently did that with the vehicle repair, which is the letter M right above that, kind of introduced that topic. And then we have the regulations over in that case, 914. We're essentially doing the same thing with the building clear vision corners. We introduce it over in 901, and then we have a new section, 915, which is what you see on the right-hand side. Really what we're trying to do here is that if we've got buildings that are really up to that front property line, 0 to 3 foot setbacks, we want them to have some sort of component so that they're not creating any kind of vision problem for a corner, whether that be for vehicles or for the pedestrian or bicyclist, so that they still have that sort of corner clearance, if you will. So I think what we'll see is this will be more in our NMU and in our form-based district. And we've got some good examples of that kind of stuff downtown where buildings have sort of their corner of their building maybe cut so you can kind of see around the corner. But we wanted to put that in here as well. You do see at the end of that paragraph there is a reference to 317. That's another design element in our form-based code where we do have a corner treatment requirement, and simply wanted to point out that you may be able to achieve both things with the corner clearance, the corner treatment, and not have to worry about doing both. You can meet both of those at the same time, if you will, or at least it'd be possible to do that. Accessory structures. Wanting to point out that there are some items, some of that text hides it, but uncovered porches, stairs, patios, decks. There'd be some items that we don't want to count when we talk about the amount of accessory structures, accessory buildings that you can have. And so we simply want to highlight that there'd be some things that we aren't going to count when we talk about those number of buildings. On the right-hand side, you see maybe a clarification or a correction from really the old ordinance that eaves can project 3 feet and that they would have at least a 2-foot setback. So that's really just a correction. Just a couple more. So we talked a little bit about waivers. 1207 is part of the code that talks about the standards that the Planning Commission would use when we're looking at a couple of these waivers here. We have a whole set of different standards in that form-based district specific to that F district. So wanting to add a reference at the end so people would know that if you're in the form-based district, obviously we're going to use those standards, not these. They are a little bit different. Site plan process for special land use. So somebody has a special land use and a site plan and they want to change that, they want to amend that, maybe it's a small addition. What's the process that they're going to go through? So on that right-hand side, in that right column under the site plan review process, right now it's either going to be the Planning Commission or it's going to be administrative site plan approval. That's what you see when you when the document's referring to section 1207 and 1205. The other procedure that we have to allow for people to come through the city is the zoning administrator process. Those would be for the smallest of the projects. And so really that's what we want to add there by adding that section 1204. So if you could imagine, there could be a project that would be small enough that it could go through the zoning administrator review process. But right now, just because it's special land use and maybe they did a small change, it would be required to go to the at least the administrative review process. So we want to kind of keep that other option out there of the zoning administrator. And then on that left-hand side of the screen, when we talk about the Planning Commission review process, Our ordinance is set up really well to streamline this process. So I think what we found here is that it didn't make a lot of sense to take something to the planning commission, to have the planning commission decide that, oh, you didn't need to go here, you could go through administrative site plan. So we really just want to remove the planning commission aspect of that review and allow staff to do that. Those standards that you have in on that right-hand column where we talk about whether or not the change be a change the nature of the use or intensity, still be those same standards that we would look at, but we just really want to eliminate the planning commission role in that, really just to streamline the process, or keep the process streamlined. And last but not least, I think this was something actually I think that Vince had found for us. So they're really just some updates in the fair housing accommodation section. And with those updates, you just see a little bit of reformatting as well on that right-hand side of the page. That is Udo 7.
Great. Thank you. Questions, comments from council members? Dave.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Are these things you're finding as you're going through and using Udo, or do you have sort of a quasi-forensic process here that you're discovering these things?
It's probably a little bit of everything. So for me, it's probably getting in and using it. For some of the other staff, like Tricia or Dan Tiley, I mean, you know, they probably find it a little bit more than I do. They can sniff some of that stuff out, but yeah, a lot of it is using it.
Oh, it was a pretty good document to begin with. It ought to be a humdinger by the time you're all finished.
I hope so. I hope so. We're really trying hard to, I know we kind of have a round 8 coming, but depending on what all we're able to get in there, we're really hoping that 8, you know, that there might be a long break between 8 and 9, let's say.
It's kind of like an operating system. There's always a new revision.
Yeah. What do we do with our time? Mr. Corbin.
So I'm going to look at this humdinger a certain way. So regarding ADUs and LDR, clarification, ADUs allowed in LDR?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so now we're looking at modifying some size requirements for LDR, or for ADUs. ADUs, are they existing structures? Could they be existing structures on the house itself or the premises itself? Let's say a garage. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So we're moving in our T1, we're changing it by adding an additional person.
Yep.
And we're also increasing it to 35%, correct?
Right.
Of the perimeter. And then tier 2.
And just so we're clear, and we're also allowing for the reduction, a smaller ADU size, right?
Yep.
From 300 to 200.
Correct.
Those are the changes.
Yep, yep. So we're having maybe more people in a smaller, denser area on that extension of the house. And then we move into tier 2. We do the same thing. We increase it again because the footprint of the property is larger, correct?
Right.
And we allow for 4 people, from 2 to 4 people. So when we were doing this as Udo, we were looking at ADUs in a certain way. And I think it was sold to us in a certain way. That this was for a dependent child, a dependent parent, and now we're adding families in an LDR area. We're essentially duplexing the home, which is what we argued against many people in this community argued against to begin with. So essentially we're making these changes to do just essentially what we stopped the process from doing. I'm quite confused here why we're doing these changes. So if somebody from the Planning Commission can give me a little bit more background, and or the Planning Division can give me a little bit more reasoning for why we're making these, in my opinion, drastic changes in LDR, I'd welcome that.
Well, maybe I'll try first here, just to say that the series of recommendations that came from the Neighborhood Improvement Committee were were much more than this. I think we had a lot of that similar conversation at the couple planning commission meetings. And I guess I don't want to call it heated debate, but I mean, there was a lot of discussion, I think, around some of the things that you're talking about. And in order to, and maybe in order to make the ADU option a little bit, more successful or more used, I think these were some of the things that they kind of settled on as a result of kind of kicking around some of those same concerns. And I think that was, and I hear what you're saying about the number of people, and I think that's why it was important that that whole section about you still have to meet that minimum size requirements that the city has. So, yeah, you could have the 4, but it's possible that you couldn't do that at the minimum, right? You have to be at the maximum then. So there was a lot of that kind of kicked around. I certainly don't have the history of kind of the ADU conversation during the UDO process, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of that stuff was batted around at the planning commission level.
Appreciate that, but these tires were kicked on that car back in UDO, in the UDO process.
And I definitely heard that as well.
And we didn't argue, we debated this heavily in the community. And we're now, it seems to have mission creep in our UDO process. And now we're trying to get to a point where we once had these debates and arguments. Now we're seemingly slowly creeping into making these modifications to allow it to happen. So, and I guess I'll again defer back to my colleagues on the council here.
Lynn, you're on Planning Commission. Are you on Neighborhood Improvement Commission? Yeah. Do you want to weigh in on? I can make some comments on this as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think that it came from the group, the Neighborhood Improvement Committee, was looking at how to allow for ADUs a little bit more equitably. What they were noticing was that people who were interested in having an ADU, but if they had too small a lot size, they couldn't actually create an ADU that would accommodate their uses. So in particular, I think there was an example of, and this is sort of gets to the number of people, and I think we also had some conversation around how you define a family and what the reasons were for limiting it to 2 people. We did toss around the idea, both at Planning Commission and at the Neighborhood Improvement Committee, of what was the word that Tricia often used? Diminutive, yeah. So we were trying to kind of keep that in mind as we were having this discussion about how we can allow for, lots of different lot sizes to access or to have this opportunity. So, I think when we landed on these, when the Neighborhood Improvement Committee landed on the numbers of people, we really wanted to make sure that it aligned with the already existing ordinance, so that while the number of people may go up, it is completely connected to the size of the unit. So a 200 square foot unit would not allow for 4 people because it doesn't fit into our ordinance. So that's my memory of it, is that it was really about how do we encourage, or how do we allow for everybody in the community to access this if they want to. And the best way to do this, and we really did have a lot of discussion, very much the same kind of conversation that you're saying right now, Scott. Is this a bridge too far? Are we going a little bit too far in our request here? And there were several things that they requested that we rejected out of hand, just because of these conversations. But this felt like, to us, a recalibration of this particular area.
And I can echo Lynn's comments on that. When it was brought to Planning Commission from Neighborhood Improvement Committee, I have the exact same concerns and questions that you do on this, Scott. And my opinion on UDO has been, I think, in alignment with yours, which is we spent an awful lot of time and an awful lot of discussion to try to get it right and to listen to the community about what it is that the community would like. And I have been very, very hesitant, and I think resistant is probably a good word as well, to making substantive changes to Udo since we just went through that big process, which is one of the reasons why I think staff is very careful every time they bring these to us to clearly distinguish things that we at Planning Commission determine or have said, that's a more substantive change versus a recalibrative change. And Lynn is exactly correct, and so is Steve. We had a lot of discussion with this, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this either based on what the community has said they told us they wanted in this regard. We had the discussion about the number of people, we had the discussion about the size, we had the discussion about the tiering, and the reason I think that I went along with at Planning Commission the 3 people level from the 2-person level and the 4 in the larger one is the example that Steve gave, which is you've got a couple who's living in an accessory dwelling unit and they have a baby, and now that having that baby forces them to move, and that seemed unjust to me in a way. And but on this particular issue, I'm not sure I'm completely sold on making these changes when it comes to the accessory dwelling units, because the public did speak to us very clearly about what it was that they wanted and they didn't want, and we made at this level specific changes to the recommendations in regard to ADUs that were made by Planning Commission to Council.
Yeah, I appreciate that, your perspectives on that, both of you. I guess, so I'd go back to the argument, though, of someone having a child in one of those ADUs. They could also be in a 1-bedroom apartment anywhere in the city and still have to make that change. So, I mean, people have to make changes, their families grow. So the intent that was sold to this council and to the community was it was intended for a dependent child, dependent parents possibly, 2 people, and that was the exception that we were willing to agree to. And we also kicked the tires in the lot size. We have a larger lot, why not allow for a little bit larger footprint or ADU? No, that was a duplex. That was duplexing the home. So I'm very protective of LDR. There's not much of it left. 48% of it's LDR. You know, we have more multifamily homes in the city of Holland than we do have single-family homes. That's the reality. And we keep talking about this need for all types of housing, but yet we only concentrate on dense housing, or it feels like. I apologize to the staff if you feel like somehow I'm suggesting that you don't think about LDR, but it just seems like there's a growing intensity to focus on only high-density type of housing, and we need it all. We need it all. So for me, I just don't feel very comfortable unless this council has more in-depth discussion on this to really go with what is before us and approving the entirety of it. Now, I would be okay if extracting that piece from the motion, taking that portion out.
Let me ask council on this to make sure that we're doing this, because this is setting it for first reading. And in Robert's Rules of Order, essentially what we're doing in this process is giving us the opportunity, putting it on the agenda to give us the opportunity to be able to review it and discuss it. This is not final approval phase on this. And it would then come, if we approved it to put it on first reading, when it comes back to us in 2 weeks on the agenda, that's the point then where we've got the ability to make amendments to it, to what's given to us. Am I correct on that, Vince?
Yes, you're correct. I was just looking at the rules myself. First reading of ordinances shall be by title only, and then it's after the first reading when it's set on the very next council meeting. That's when the full sort of gamut of rules can apply. But first reading is simply just the title of the ordinance, and the obligation of the clerk is to make sure all council have a copy of that first reading of whatever that ordinance is, and at the next council meeting is where it can be amended, or it can be tabled, there's all kinds of things that can happen after the first reading.
So staff is obligated to bring back the same version at the next meeting, or can they modify it and bring it back?
Yeah, staff has brought to you an ordinance that's been noticed on this agenda. I think they would have to bring back, if they wanted to bring back a different one, it would be bringing back another version of an ordinance at a later time. But the one that they have Now, I don't, there's no procedure for staff to amend stuff necessarily. Council can amend after the first reading has been presented, certainly.
Yeah. I see it, Scott, from a process standpoint is this has been presented to us as a recommendation from staff. We now have the opportunity over the next 2 weeks to look at it, mark it up, do make adjustments or changes so that when it comes to us before in the next meeting, we've got the opportunity to be able to do all of those things that Vince suggested. And actually, that ties into a procedural question that I was going to ask because it's at 2 different places on the agenda today. So I want to make sure that we handle this correctly and we vote at the right place and everybody understands what we're voting for. Keith, you had something.
I'm going to let our attorney deal with the technical and the process and that kind. But just to clarify something too, and it's minor, and you don't have to apologize to us ever, Scott. It's fine, right? But technically at this point, this isn't a recommendation from staff. This is a recommendation from Planning Commission.
Thank you.
And it was brought to staff through the Neighborhood Improvement Committee. So just.
Thank you.
Indirectly.
Yep.
I guess so indirectly, staff made the recommendations, Planning Commission, they accepted them.
Well, yeah, staff's bringing forth a recommendation from Planning Commission.
But
Thank
it
you
went
for that
through
clarification.
Neighborhood Improvement Committee, a
And then-
discussion with staff. Staff then had the discussion with Planning Commission. So what you're dealing with right now is not a recommendation from staff technically. You're dealing with a recommendation from the Planning Commission. And I'll let Vince talk about, and quite frankly, this is something that eventually we want to fix in our agenda process when you have these, that you actually are taking 2 actions on the same agenda about, we're talking about it, and then later you're doing first reading. I think we can fix this and make this less complicated in the future. But right now, Vince, how would we deal with this?
I'm still on the hot mic here. I think the first reading of an ordinance, it can only get to an adopted ordinance if there's a first reading. And there has to be, this council has to decide that which is presented to it, ought it be considered as a first reading or not, right? And if the council says, well, we don't want this as a first reading, that's council's prerogative certainly, but it potentially could make it a longer process. But yeah, there's really not much more other than the first reading as presented. If it's to be accepted in that context, and that does come later in the agenda. This is under the reports from commissions and reports from, read it here, reports from boards, city officers, and commissions. That's where we are in the agenda right now.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on this. We're not, under this item on the agenda, where we stand right now, we're just receiving information. We're not going to take a vote at this point on it. But when we get down to item 16, that's where then there would be the opportunity for council to make a motion and vote on whether or not they wanted to put this out for first reading.
Yes, sir.
And it would not be and so for everybody's clear, it's not the adoption of this language into the city ordinance. It's just to put it in front of us have the ability to be able to read it, review it, work on it before it comes back to us at a point where we could actually make amendments, do what we choose with it at that point.
You're correct. That's my understanding.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, and just for clarity, so as we vote on it, if we vote no to accept it for first reading, it will go back to whomever, and they will work on it and bring back a second version.
Or it would die.
Or it would die.
If the other bodies, there are other commissions mentioned, it may not come back, right? There may not be that opportunity, but so those are certainly options.
But the problem is, and just factually, I'm not debating, right, is if you would do that at this stage, the whole set of things goes back. You can't carve out one portion and amend or deny. You only would be able to do that
next meeting,
theoretically at the next meeting.
Go ahead, Dave's got a question.
Dave, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the most prudent thing to do at this point is to accept for first reading, and when it comes back to us on February 1, then we have the opportunity to remake the sausage, if you will. So that'd be the easiest and most prudent thing to do, in my view.
Yep, and at this stage of the agenda, I want to make sure we stay on track with that. I appreciate that comment, but I think that's going to fit more in with the discussion on whether we have a motion in front of us or not. So I'm going to try to focus us on any other questions for staff in regard to the report that they've given us. And Mr. Corbin, you have more.
Yeah, so one more. Section 3912, just above that, section 3912 that you were showing us. regarding the streamlined process of having the zoning administrator approve minor changes. How much latitude does the zoning administrator have? I don't know that I have clarity on that, because that again was another issue or concern when the UDO process started. How much and how broad does the administrator have to make decisions? And I'm not sure I have clarity on this particular section, how far and wide it goes or how narrow it is.
Sure. Yep, that's a fair question. So it doesn't change any of that, the breadth of that discretion at all. What this change does is to say that for projects that could have gone to zoning administrator for approval, that just because it's a special land use, right now that option isn't there. So it doesn't change any of that discretion. It just would allow for a project that is a special land use. So to answer the question about how we find some of these things, through examples. So we had a church in an industrial zoning district that did an addition about 1,000 square feet. If that were to come in, without a special land use, that would be allowed to be zoning administrator review. But because, they were amending their plan, that option isn't on the table for them right now. So it doesn't change any of that discretion. It just allows for that same process that we already have to take advantage of that. Again, we are talking about small projects, the same small projects that you've already put into that same column of zoning administrator reviews. So it doesn't change the standards or anything. It just allows them to take advantage of that for small. And admittedly, I think we're talking about a small percentage of projects that would be doing that. And just to sort of wrap up, I'll just say, and again, those standards for the site plan review, it's still possible that even if they met that requirement to be in that category, if staff found that, oh no, this is something though that changes the nature and scope of this project, it can still be kicked to that, I guess I'll call larger review. So it doesn't automatically go there, but it has the ability to do that if they were, and for instance, for that church project, there would have been nothing, I'll say, wrong with that project to go to the zoning administrator. It was such a small project.
All right, thank you. I yield.
Any other questions for staff? Yeah, Nikki.
I do. Back to ADUs, and maybe this is more appropriate for the next, when it comes for first reading, but I may forget. So when this was being developed, this ordinance, it was mentioned that there were only, since the ADUs were allowed, unattached ADUs, aren't they allowed? They were allowed like 5 years ago. And it was mentioned that only 5 of them had been requested or applied for. Have there been any more since that time?
Do you know that, Mark?
Any more?
I think the ordinance passed in 2016, so a little bit more than 5 years ago. And I keep hearing around 7 or 8 total. I can't verify that as a totally solid number, but there is a new one. And is there a second? There's one in construction right now, and then the one that Belinda is it constructed fully or process?
Nope. We're still working on it.
So there are 2 recent ones. Prior to these 2 recent ones, I think it had been some time before there had been one for a while.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda, item 12E 4.1, approve certified local government grant application. Mr. Van Beek?
Mayor?
Oh, yes.
We haven't had a motion or a vote.
We're not doing a motion or a vote on this agenda.
You have to receive and file.
Oh, we have to receive and file. I'm sorry. Thank you, Kathy. I would entertain a motion to receive and file the report from the Planning Commission in regard to text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance.
So moved.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Ernst Horst. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Well, it's not because I wanted to call roll, but.
Always safer to have you call the roll, then I know we're covered.
Freeman?
Yes.
Peters? Corbin? Coronado?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Now, item 12E 4.1, certified local government grant application. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm going to hand this off to Assistant City Manager Van Dyken, who takes care of our projects. And in this one, just a clarification again, our relationship with the museum on this one is that the museum actually is city property. So Matt's going to give you, unfortunately, you know, a lot of times Matt is the popular guy. This time he's kind of sharing some bad news. But then we're going to talk about how Connie, our grants manager, is helping us maybe to mitigate that bad news, at least in part.
So thanks, Keith. I'm going to refer to this as an opportunity, not necessarily bad news.
There you go. Okay.
Just for a little bit of background, the Holland Museum property actually came to the city through the federal government, we believe, back in the 80s. Prior to that, believe it or not, this was kind of a shock to me, the museum was in the Centennial Bed and Breakfast on the corner there. So kind of an interesting little piece. We actually, the city owns the building. We're responsible for any structural maintenance that happens at that facility. And then we contract with the Holland Historic Trust to operate that building as a museum. So that's a little bit of background. In this past calendar year, it was brought to our attention that there were some issues potentially with the roof on the museum. Tricia is the contact on our side for the museum, and then she deals with the Holland Historical Trust folks. We did a site visit. We looked at some of the things that were over there, and we had some hesitation as to our level of expertise, as to what to evaluate those issues that we were seeing. So we bought in, if you remember, we did an exterior evaluation for the City Hall. We bought in the Chrisman Group and Quinn Evans, who specialize in historic building preservation. We contracted with them to do an assessment of the Holland Museum building. And unfortunately, that did not come back very well. There are some pretty significant structural issues with the exterior of the building that are going to require repair. We are not currently ready to give you an entire number at this point because we're still in the due diligence process of this. It's going to be a big number. It's likely to be a seven-figure number to fix that facility. Again, I'm hesitating to give you an actual number because we are still in the process of making sure we know exactly what we're dealing with. We know from what we can see on the outside exactly what we're dealing with. But we are currently in the process of an interior assessment of the building to address humidity issues or some of the issues that could be actually causing the problems that we'll be intending to fix. We also have contracted with Chrisman to come in and actually remove a parapet stone from the top of the museum building so that when we go to do the restoration and we begin to pull stones out and repair stones, we don't get surprised. So much like we did at City Hall, you remember we took about an 800-pound stone off of the side of City Hall on the north side of the building to know what was behind it. I am, as professionally, I'm not going to give you a number of what the cost is going to be until I have a very high confidence in what that number will be. So we're getting to that point. That's the opportunity. We have a building that's owned by the city that needs some help. We're in the process of determining exactly what those costs will be. And we're also currently in the process of putting together the Municipal Capital Improvement Fund plan for your potential approval in May of this year. And we will have a recommendation on how to handle this problem in that fund when you get presented with the budget. So a lot more things to come. I will just say that MCIF this year, there's a lot of things. We've done our departmental meetings. We're going through our budget process right now. I'm not sure everybody's going to get everything they want in MCIF. There's a lot of things that are being asked for, and you have given to us kind of the long-term goal of making sure all of our stuff is maintained, and we have not lost sight of that, and that'll be a high priority. So more to come. The item that is actually in front before you this evening is Connie. I don't know if Connie's going to come up. She can give the better details, but much as you approved a resolution of intent to accept funds for the exterior City Hall, I believe this particular grant is along those same lines, which would help in the eventual repair of the museum.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so Matt is exactly correct. Recently, you might remember we were awarded a $50,000 grant from the State Historic Preservation Office for the exterior restoration of City Hall. We're still in the process of getting the grant agreement signed for that, but it was exciting news. This is a very similar grant program also through the State Historic Preservation Office. It's an annual grant opportunity for certified local governments. And the Certified Local Government Program is a partnership between the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service, and the City of Holland participates in it. So it qualifies us to apply for these grant monies every year. The grant is specifically for projects that identify, document, preserve, and tell the story of local historic properties, and it allows the CLG, the Certified Local Government, to support or to sponsor an application from a nonprofit organization in the community. So given these requirements and the recent findings at the museum, we felt that this would be a really good fit and a good opportunity to potentially offset some costs of the project. So generally, the State Historic Preservation Office, the maximum award is $100,000. We are seeking $100,000 due to the significant issues with the structure as well as the urgency of the project. There's a lot of water incursion issues that are happening currently, and not only is it detrimental to the structure, but we also love our local museum and want to make sure that the artifacts are protected there because those tell the stories of our community. So there's no cost to apply for the grant at this time. It's just, putting it in and seeing, when and if we get anything for it. So just thought it would be a good opportunity to try and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments for staff? Mr. Corbin.
Would this be for engineering studies, or maybe I missed that? What can the $100,000 be used for if we were to be awarded?
So it would be for the physical repair of the building.
Actual repair, but not for engineering studies or anything like that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments for staff? Mr. Van Beek.
You'll see also, and thank you, Connie, for doing this in the report. We talked about, and you'll see that anytime that you have a report in front of you that has to do with grants, that we're giving you kind of a running tally of the work that's being done. And it's certainly a team approach, but we're really recognizing Connie for taking the lead on all of this, and we appreciate you doing great work for us, Connie. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments for staff? Great, thank you very much. What is the pleasure of council in regard to item 12E 4.1 to approve the certified local government grant application?
Move to approve.
Moved by Coronado. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Aaronsource. Any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Coronado?
Yes.
Aaronshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Vreeman?
Yes.
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item 12E 6.1, gifts. Kathy, would you please review the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts: Parks and Recreation, Sal Perez Youth Scholarship Fund, A.J. Bass and Catherine Ristola Bass, $500. Parks and Recreation, marketing materials for basketball 3-on-3 tournament, Holland Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, $1,000. Parks and Recreation is the recipient of in-kind donation of discounted frozen yogurt valued at $572.50 for the Mother-Son event from Peach Wave. Public Safety Services, Police Operations, Officer DeYoung Retirement Gift, Holland Police Officers Association, $520.50. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Thank you, Kathy. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the gifts?
Move to approve said gifts and with the token of our appreciation.
Moved by Coronado. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Aaronsource. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 13, communications from the city manager. And I think you are 1 minute away from what you guessed this afternoon we would be at. You're pretty good tonight.
I will keep it brief, but I do have three things tonight. One, just a reminder, your retreat is on Saturday. We're starting right at 8 o'clock because I know I've heard from all of you, right, that you like to get it and rolling, and we'll see what time we get done. Start at 8, kind of have breakfast, get rolling at 8:15. Citizen survey presentation from Hope College. Dave Miedema from Miedema Consulting. Then kind of dig into business plan, kind of where we're at, and then try to transition into the time for you all to discuss priorities and then rank those priorities. So that's the plan for Saturday. You know, we always say like 12:30 is kind of the target, but again, you guys talk and it's your agenda. So that's one. Two, I think that this is public news, but it's probably maybe not very well-known news yet, excuse me. And I'm just going to read this actually from Chris Bennett from Dwelling Place, who sent this on, and actually in some of the communications, he very specifically wanted me to pass this on to you. It's about the First Hope at 10th Street project, which you'll remember is the partnership between Dwelling Place, First United Methodist, and Hope Church. And I think he used the term disappointing but not unexpected. That unfortunately it did not score high enough to receive the LIHTC reservation in the October 22 funding round, but that they are not deterred, and we're going to be working very hard on updating the application, assessing other potential improvements to the scoring, and then resubmitting in the April 2023 funding round and give it another try. This is what he specifically wanted me to read to you. From myself and everyone involved on this project, I wanted to extend a very heartfelt thank you to you and everyone at the City of Holland for your willingness to work through this project with us and the support you've shown for this and other affordable housing projects. We're hoping the April round will bring us better results, but the work the city has done to this date cannot be overlooked, and I just wanted to say thank you. Hopefully we'll have more good news in April, and I did just confirm with him also, obviously the partners in this already know this. It's not new news to them, and that you'll recall that the funding that went through the process at Ottawa County was not just that the funding was good for this round, but that it was actually good for up to 2 rounds of funding. So that funding is not in jeopardy either, looking at the April round of funding. So again, I think honestly, and some of us have probably talked to Chris, I talked to Chris, disappointing, but I think he, quite frankly, kind of knew the way these processes work at the state, is that it's not atypical. In fact, it's somewhat common that you don't get it the first time around, and then you hope you get it the second time. So certainly, again, disappointing, and yet I don't think completely unexpected. And then the third thing, maybe a little unusual, but I think it's important. You know, I certainly serve on your behalf on different community groups and boards and the like. But in this case, I wanted to at least make it known of a possibility so that if any of you wanted to express concerns or support or anything, not really a vote on it type thing, but you can communicate to me. I've been approached, quite frankly, I think it was because of our interaction with MERS for our drop program with our police, that the MERS CEO approached me last week, and they have an opening, and they would like to recommend me to be a member of the MERS board. I think it brings value, not to me, I think it brings value to the city for me to do that. We certainly continue to be very interested, even though I think we're a good ways through our journey in managing our pension liabilities. It's not done, so maybe to be sitting at that table I think is helpful. I'm still taking a look at, Sync is helping me, taking a look that, you know, it doesn't create major conflicts with my job here with responsibilities. It's not a huge responsibility, right? I think it's like 4 conference calls a year and then maybe 4 meetings a year in Lansing, and then I think 2 of those are incorporated with a day-and-a-half conference and a retreat. So, but it's different than some of the ones that I'm like on the Central Dispatch Authority or WeMet, by position. This is a little bit different, so I really wanted to not just kind of say, hey, I got appointed to a board and that's the first you all know about it. I wanted to at least inform you so that if there's any strong feelings, maybe that you would wish that I not make myself available for that possibility, that you'd have the ability to share that with me. And that's all. Again, I'm not looking necessarily, but if any of you right now or later want to express that to me, that'd be great.
Great, thank you. Item 14, appointments and communications from the mayor. In alignment with the great social justice awards that we had this evening and the recognition that we've had a Human Relations Commission in Holland since 1966, which is longer than I've been alive, which I think is a pretty impressive matter. And not that I've been alive since 1967, but that the Human Relations Commission has been around that long. And also the fact that we had a wonderful Martin Luther King Day celebration this week, that the City of Holland was a sponsor of that event and has been for years. I've a mayoral proclamation in regard to designating the month of January to celebrate the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Whereas Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a champion for civil rights, a prophet for freedom, exhibited extraordinary courage and faith, lifting his voice for the African American community and by extension many other voices. And whereas Dr. King brought a generation to recognize the universal threat of justice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And whereas we celebrate a man and a movement that transformed our nation, and we remember that our freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of others. And whereas as a nation, we continue to work toward achieving the dream where opportunity and access for all abound. And whereas through his unrelenting resistance, persistence, and determination, he changed not only laws, but the hearts and minds of his fellow man. And whereas his dream for greater economic opportunity, access, and equal treatment under the law for all has yet to be fully realized for many, we march forward to let hope for all abound. And whereas, now more than ever, we must heed his teachings by embracing our convictions and bring goodness and goodwill to others. And whereas, Dr. King taught us that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of convenience and comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And whereas the City of Holland commemorates the life and legacy of Dr. King's great vision, we affirm the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, therefore, I, Nathan Box, Mayor of the City of Holland, Michigan, and members of the Holland City Council do hereby proclaim the month of January to celebrate the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We invite the community to not only celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. throughout our city and share this annual tribute, but also to engage in community learning opportunities. Given under my hand and the seal of the City of Holland this 18th day of January 2023, Nathan Box, Mayor. And that is all that I have this evening. We do have appointments, motions, and communications from council members. Mr. Corbin, I believe you do have something this evening.
Yes, I have a couple things. One is a nomination for an appointment, and then just a couple comments as well. So an appointment to the Water System Advisory Council is needed in order to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Sue France. So the recommendation is to appoint Matt Allen to a 5-year term on the Water System Advisory Council with the expiration date of March 11th, 2028.
And what is the pleasure of council in regard to that recommendation? Moved by Peters. Is there support? Support by Vreeman. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And Mr. Corbin, you had some comments.
Couple more things. Just want to thank my colleagues for getting in their evaluations or for on council structure. So thank you very much for doing that. I know it was timely to get it in, and I appreciate you doing that. And then third is I just want to also thank you and congratulate you for good governance. As we work together, we communicate, we talk, we let the transparency of what we're doing. We're very much transparent to the community in which we work with and for. So I just want to thank you for demonstrating good governance as a city council.
Any other communications, motions from council members? Mr. Byrd.
Yes, wanted to get clarification of a couple things from our city manager. The location of the advance, that wasn't spoken out. Just want to get that.
I thought we were having a retreat.
That was a call out to Mr. Chathui in case he's right. Yeah, I saw that.
Watching.
It is at the Holland Civic Center. Yeah, hi Mike. It is at the Holland Civic Center place. The Market View, so the second story there. You know, I'm going to let you know. They are preparing for an event that night, but the staff at the Civic Center said, hey, there might be every once in a while some noise, but I think we should be set. So we really wanted to have it there. We've done it here too, but we think that's a nice setting. So it is at the Civic Center place.
All right, great. Thank you for that. The second one was Chris was denied the first round by the state. So they're going to pursue a second round or go at this. Will they need to present to us again?
No, unless they make what I'll call a substantive change to something that either would change the planning commission approval that came through you, or if there's something substantive that changes that would require us to take another look at our pilot and our MSA agreement. Mm-hmm. And I've received no indication that they're looking to do that. But be assured that if they do something that triggers an additional review by us, then that would require them to come back to us.
All right, cool. One last thing. So thank you for the proclamation today, Mayor. I was on Indeed a little bit ago and seen Lakeshore Advantage posted something. It was a picture of the billboard that we have in the city. Mm-hmm. It reads, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Martin Luther King Jr. I can say that the majority of us sitting up here are doing this not for our own benefit, but to benefit others. Regardless of what our viewpoints are, regardless of if we agree with one another or disagree with one another, we're all up here because we have an innate desire to do for other people. I think as we move along through this process, first let me say this. Dr. King said, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And I just think about the society that we live in today. Thank you. When so many people are talking about me, right? What's my desire? What can you do for me? And we take the approach of being a servant leader or just being a servant. I think when we open up to do that, it creates what Dr. King envisioned. It creates unity, right? One of the things that we have on this council, and we just went over this with the documents that we just turned in, is even though we don't agree, even though we may have our tiffs about different things, we still come together united. And we are one group representing the citizens of the city of Holland. And I think if we continue, not just this board, but the people in our community, the people in our county, the people in our state, the people in our country, even around the world, if we continue or start making decisions to help other people and stop being selfish, but living a life of selflessness, we can start meeting that goal more rapidly of unity. Because really, that's the whole message that Dr. King presented, was unity. So I implore us, I implore our community to do selfless acts, to do things that would go beyond sometimes our comfort zone. And I posted on there, sometimes it's just a smile. Sometimes it's time, money. There are so many different things that we could do to bring unity throughout our community. And at a time right now where things are so divisive, we look in the United States politically, but beyond that, around the world, things are just crazy and people are just divided, period. Even within families, bringing it closer. And I think it's time that we start exercising and not just being mouthpieces to what Dr. King said, but let our actions speak to unite people. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Quincy. Any other communications from council members? Seeing none, next item on the agenda, first reading of ordinances, text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO, number 7. Mr. Van Beek.
I think we kind of described what this motion would or wouldn't do earlier. I can provide more clarification if you would like. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mayor, and let you lead your members through a process.
Thank you. Just following our process and our procedure here of always making sure we give staff the opportunity to do that report. Yes, for those who are watching at home, this is something we discussed extensively earlier in the meeting. What is the pleasure of council in regarding sending the text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance for first reading?
Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. Hoekstra.
I move that we adopt the recommendation to place this item on first reading and revisit it at our meeting on February 1 for second reading and potential adoption.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support? Support by Byrd. Any discussion?
Quick thing.
Yeah, Mr. Vreeman. Okay, happy to explain. So what we did we received a report from staff on about proposed text amendments from a recommendation from Planning Commission. That was what we did earlier. As part of the parliamentary process, before we can actually look at a change to an ordinance, we actually have to put it for first reading. And I think, and Vince, you can correct me on this, but I think it goes back to the days where we didn't have the ability to have as much electronic communication or as much advance notice for things. So a governing body like this would say, somebody would say, I would like to talk about this particular thing or propose this particular ordinance. Pass it out, putting it out for first reading, saying, here it is, this is what I am proposing, take a look at it. We're not going to do anything with it this meeting except say, is it something that we would like to entertain for a motion at a following meeting? Did I explain that well, Vince?
Yes, Your Honor, you
Okay,
did.
okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
it's,
I'd like that support. Appreciate that. And so what the motion is to say, are we going to put this into first reading so that then we as a body have the ability to be able to look at it over the course of the next couple of weeks, process it, potentially come up with ideas about how we may want to change it, may want to amend it, how we might choose to vote on it. At the next meeting, then it will actually come on the agenda for us to decide whether or not we want to approve it, change it, deny it, all of those kinds of things. Okay, Mr. Corbin.
And just for the record, I will be voting and supporting to put it on first reading. However, just so the public knows, there is a specific area that I don't agree, right now, I don't agree with, and I'm hopeful that we'll have further debate on that issue.
Under Robert's Rules of Order, you bet we will.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other discussion on the motion in front of us? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin?
Yes.
Coronado?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Vreeman? Peters? Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Item 17, adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Vreeman, support by Peters. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you all.